Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Laura Pruneau-Fowler. I serve as Museum Advancement Administrator for St. Genevieve Museum Learning Center. I'm involved in all aspects of advancing our mission here at the museum, primarily through grant writing, but also through other work that enables us to offer programs like this Missouri Humanities Lecture Series. We want to extend our thanks to Missouri Humanities Council for their grant-funded support of this program, and our co-sponsor, St. Genevieve County Library, Library Director Sean Long, as well as all of our lecturers, you, the participants, and the museum board, staff, and volunteers, and everyone who had a hand in making this special event possible. Today we're kicking off a 5-day lecture series with our first lecture, Exploring St. Genevieve's Traditions by Robert Mueller. And I will tell you a few things about Robert Mueller. He has a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and a Master's in Engineering Administration from Missouri University of Science and Technology. He has been a member of the Foundation for Restoration of Ste. Genevieve since 2004 and previously served as its president and vice president. He has been a trustee of the State Historical Society of Missouri since 2006 and has served on the executive committee since 2009, positions which provide him with contact with noted historians from across the state. Robert manages the Foundation's Speakers Bureau and is listed as the presenter of over 20 different topics on St. Genevieve history, including several related to our French and German history. He serves as a group tour guide for the St. Genevieve Tourism Department when needed, and is a past chairperson of the city's Tourism Advisory Committee. He's a member of the local Civil War Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War and the St. Genevieve Colonial Militia reenactment groups. He contributed a chapter to the recently published book, The American Revolution in the West, and recently had an article published in the Center for French Colonial Studies, Le Journal. He is a contributor to local area newspapers and St. Genevieve's radio station on topics related to food, traditions, festivals, and the history of the area. And Bob is a town historian who you can call and definitely get some good answers. And so just want to note to please keep your questions and comments in mind as we have ample time for interactive discussion right after the lecture. So, ladies and gentlemen, Robert Mueller.
Actually, I like to have discussions while it's going on, because I want input from you all too. That's one of the purposes of this lecture series, is to get some interaction with the community. And so that's what we'll do. I'll ask some questions and some of you can provide answers. And we're not going to talk about all St. Genevieve traditions. That would take a long time. I chose some that are pretty interesting to me.
A fiddler on the roof. Sounds crazy, no? But here, in our little village of Anatevka, you might say every one of us is a fiddler on the roof, trying to scratch out a pleasant, simple tune without breaking his neck. It isn't easy. You may ask, why do we stay up there if it's so dangerous? Well, we stay because Anatevka is our home. And how do we keep our balance? That I can tell you in one word. Tradition! Because of our traditions, we've kept our balance for many, many years. Here in Anatevka, we have traditions for everything. How to sleep, how to eat, how to work, how to wear clothes. For instance, we always keep our heads covered and always wear a little prayer shawl. This shows our constant devotion to God. You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know.
That was a good intro. I thought that was pretty good. What's the name of their village? I'll tell you. Ours is St. Genevieve, and so we have some traditions also. The word tradition comes from the Latin noun traditio. You're going to get a little lesson here today, too, which derives from the verb pradere, which means hand over or deliver. It corresponds also to the Greek peridesis, which also comes from a verb meaning hand over. Traditio and peridosis can be literally or figuratively, in the latter case, often to mean teaching or instruction. One guy also described tradition as peer pressure from dead people. So we're going to talk about traditions today. You can see that traditions can be many, many things. It can be from your culture, it can be from religion and from your family, celebrations, just different things, folklore that end up being a tradition to either yourself or to your family or to your town or to your nation. Anybody have any personal traditions? I'll start with one. I always sleep on the right side of the bed with your feet when you're going to sleep. I always put on my left sock and my left shoe first. It's been a tradition since I've been little. Linda could probably describe a few others. Does anybody have a personal tradition? Well, that was it. Yeah.
John, you just don't know it.
Yeah. So personal ones are probably not as predominant as family traditions. In our family, we tried to start one. I grew up in a family of 6 boys, and when we brought a girl home and we wanted to marry, we could tell if she was going to be a good one if she would eat over them. A few of the girls slipped it under the table. But in our family, Thanksgiving is a real tradition. The foods that we have are pretty well set. One year, I decided to change things up a little bit. So picked my first son up from the airport, and we get in the car. It's not much more than, hello, Mom and Dad, but what's for Thanksgiving? So I gave him the list. I gave him some of the new stuff, and I had thrown out a couple of things. He said, that's not going to work. You got to put that back in. We pick up the other son from the airport. Same thing. It was a different thing. We said, no pecan pie this year. He said, what are you talking about? We got to have pecan pie. So a family tradition, I can in my sleep know what we're going to eat for Thanksgiving dinner. Anybody else have family traditions, Christmas traditions, things like that?
I'm not Italian, but I have an Italian Christmas dinner every year. My family loves it.
Yeah, one of ours is eating pork and sauerkraut on New Year's and New Year's Day.
I was just thinking of the box. We, when my nephew was born, we used a box that a gift came in for him, and every year at Christmas,
any birthday too.
Okay, every time there was an occasion for gifts in the family, you put it in the box, and it got passed back and forth between. There were only 2 brothers, so they got passed back and forth.
The box.
I know one of my brothers and his friend, they have a tradition of, on their birthday, chaining an empty beer keg someplace on their property. It's the only thing of, you pass the same Christmas card back and forth. Family and friends, it's an important thing, and it kind of puts us on a comfort zone. We kind of know what's going to happen. We have friends that when we lived in Kansas City, that was 20-some years ago, that when we meet them, it's still like yesterday. Well, we just said 24 years ago or more. But when we see them again, it's like the conversation never ended. Just start off and keep going. I'm going to skip town because we're going to come back to that. How about national traditions?
Yeah, well, like fireworks on the 4th of July.
Yeah. Putting your hand over your heart when the Star Spangled Banner is played. Taking your hat off. Not that many people wear hats. I guess they do. Back in the old days, all the men wore hats. Now we just wear baseball caps. But taking your hat off is a tradition. Driving on the right side of the road is a tradition. It's different than England and Australia. So sometimes you do traditions and they become law, and it's for our safety, like driving on the right side of the road, stopping when there's a red sign, putting your blinker on when you're turning left or right. Those are some national kinds of traditions. And some of our holidays and festivals. The 4th of July you mentioned. Juneteenth is a new tradition. It's just getting started. It'll go forward in the future. Martin Luther King Day was a new holiday. We've had Labor Day, Memorial Day. We're going to talk about a couple of those in relation to St. Genevieve because they have roots here also. Anybody know any town traditions that we have here? Lagina. Yeah, we're going to talk about that one.
Community band playing on Thursday nights.
Yeah, that's another one. And it was when we first moved here, it was in the summer, and I said, Linda, let's go up and hear the muni band. She thought we were going to the park and a nice gazebo and all that. So we went up and she learned about listening to the muni band.
The desert.
Pardon?
The
Someone else?
desert.
The desert, yeah.
My hearing stopped.
The desert.
Oh, the desert, yeah. Calling things a certain name. Where I worked, we had one place that was called the dance floor for some reason, because when they first built it, it was a big plywood floor. So we get those kind of town traditions. Some go way back, like somebody mentioned, like DNA. That's back from actually our Canadian roots, or actually our French roots, or from France. So those kind of traditions go a long way. Sometimes traditions start and then they end, and I'm going to talk about a couple of those today too. But traditions help us. They make us feel comfortable. We know what's going on or going to happen, so we're a little bit more comfortable, not as apprehensive when things come at us. We have enough coming at us every day that's different, especially for someone who grew up in the old farming tradition of putting up hay loose with horses and have seen all this transition and doing now this with your phone. Linda's trying to teach me how to use my card, where you just tap it. And using a kiosk, boy, that is really fun. So sometimes we have to change. Sometimes traditions kind of change a little bit, but they always have that root that helps us day in and day out. So I'm going to talk about food as a tradition in our family. We're all foodies. My kids are foodies. My grandkids are foodies. My granddaughter, when she was about 5, was eating sushi and stuff like that. I mean, it's just so. St. Genevieve has a number of food traditions, and on the left there you have a typical good St. Genevieve fried chicken dinner with mashed potatoes and liver dumplings. Now, her father told me once, you can't eat liver dumplings without having mashed potatoes. There's got to be something there. Traditions like the pommes frites at Jour de Fête at the Lions Club. That's a little bit of a French word, but it's still good old French fries, and we love those. If you look down at the bottom in the middle, it's pork burgers. Jour de Fête. You cannot go to Jour de Fête without getting a pork burger. Maybe 2 pork burgers or 3 pork burgers. I've seen people order a lot of pork burgers. And in the upper right is our family having a Thanksgiving dinner at my son's house. And all the traditional stuff's there, plus a few that they've introduced that we now call tradition. And we also have a lot of restaurants here in town that are kind of traditional. Some that have come and gone, and some reincarnated, like the Flash and Audubon's has been a reincarnation of what started out as the city hotel, and then morphed into Audubon's, and then back to the Hotel Genevieve, and now Audubon. So those are comfortable things that we know what we're going to get. We like going there. It's part of our food tradition. Can you think of any others that might be added to this? Just general food traditions. We'll talk about liver dumplings. You can't be in St. Louis without talking about that.
Bouillon?
Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah.
Overlay sausage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hot dog.
Yes. So we'll talk about liver dumplings. Liver niflies, spelled 3 or 4 different ways, but it really comes from the German Badisch word, K-M-O with an umlaut, P-F-L-I, which meant nerfly, or nerfly is kind of what sounded Badisch. And what that means is little button. And a lot of the places, when we go eat liver dumplings, you look at it and they may say liver spätzle, which is a little bit different, but they're really in the size like that, which is like a little button. And there's some other German pastas we'll talk about, but that's pretty traditional for liver dumplings. Trying to make liver dumplings for a festival is hard work. Using the old scraper thing to make liver dumplings right and left. How many of you know that we had a liver dumpling mascot?
My husband just loses it every time he sees that thing. Like, we'll be at the Harvest Festival and the dumpling will come out and he's like, oh my God, what is that?
I didn't know we had a mascot.
Yeah, and I think that was Ollie Nagger Award for the first time. There was a liver dumpling festival or cook-off or something. And last year we had a German photographer come to town, and she had seen the movie New Offenburg. I don't know if you've all seen that, but it's a movie about people in St. Genevieve that still spoke the Badisch dialect, and they're like 5th generation. Unfortunately, we only had about 3 of the 10 knew that, still alive. But she came and she was so excited about that movie, she wanted to come here and shoot pictures. Well, naturally, we had to get Bill and Patty Nagger and Betty Geck involved. And actually, Bill dressed up in his liver dumpling outfit and had a tuba, and they were playing the Badener Lied, which is the song of Baden, and singing it, and Christina's taking movies and stuff. So she was quite impressed with that. Because if you go to Germany and you ask for a liver dumpling, a Leberknödel, it's a little round ball about that big, that's not little, but it's made with liver and stuff, and it floats in a soup of broth. That's liver dumplings in most of Germany. This comes from the Black Forest and the central part of southern Germany, which back in the day when our German ancestors came was called Swabia. It was between Baden and Bavaria, and they're a fun-loving people. That's where my Muellers came from, and there they make it like this. And so when a lot of the Germans came here, this is what they had on. I mean, we had it every Sunday. We would have liver dumplings, a roast chicken, dirty rice dressing, bread dressing, and but Mom really could make liver dumplings. And like most cooks, it was a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So we said, Mom, you got to write your recipe down. So she measured everything. We sat down to eat and we said, Mom, this is the worst batch of liver dumplings you have ever made. Forget about all that stuff. Go back to how you're making it. So I still don't have a liver dumpling recipe for her. I have one from my hand. But liver dumplings has kind of become a part of St. Genevieve history. It's what we're known for. You can go to Farmington, and when St. Joe has their annual chicken dinner, which I think is today, they have liver dumplings.
I saw that in the church bulletin.
Yeah, and Bonterre will have them, but this is St. Genevieve. And people usually turn up their nose, or they love them. That's one of the things in our family. I love liver dumplings. My beloved other half does not eat liver dumplings, so that's more for me.
They never made those down very well.
Yeah, probably. We have a few Germans that have moved down that way.
Bob, I noticed that's the easy way to make liver dumplings.
Uh-huh.
They go, you
Yeah,
got it on the
I'm
next
gonna
page.
talk about
Yeah.
So there's some other what I call the German pasta series. And if you look up on the left, that's a Netflix again. And that's how you would get them like at the old brick on Fridays. That's what they look like. They're made out of flour, egg, and water, salt, and some people put a little nutmeg in. And you can make them different ways. You can make them with the slider thing. You can, if it's runny enough, you can put it in a colander, let it drip out. You can put it in a potato press. You can put it in, my technique, well, the one on the bottom there on the left that's a Spätzle. And that means little sparrow. I mean, when I was a kid, we taught sparrows were little spatsies, which kind of is a derivation of the word Spätzle. So, I don't know how it got that name, but again, you can make those with the slider thing if you go real slow because they get long and springy. Or you can use the technique on the bottom, which is a special board called a Spätzlebreit. And you have I use a cake knife called a Spätzle-Schaber. And you kind of scrape off the thing off the board. My dad had one, so I had to make one for myself. And that's typically, if I'm going to make a lot of them, that's how I'm doing it.
Well, these old German women used to use the old dinner plate.
Well, that's my mom used a dinner plate or a bowl, just cutting it off, scratching it, or schnitting it. I didn't know that word scratching, but Bill Niagara, I think, taught me that. In German, it would be schnitt, to cut.
Scratch your nipples.
There's other ways, like you say, cutting off the edge of the plate or out of the bowl. I'm just doing a small batch, that's what I do. Noodles, another German pasta. My mom would roll those out. And she could cut them thin for chicken noodle soup or make them in little, we always had, not diamonds, trapezoids, I guess is the right term, shapes. And we bought chicken and dumplings is probably, my one brother, I mean, I think he could live on chicken and dumplings. But Linda's family had a tradition of using drop dumplings. And so I've had to change, every once in a while we have drop dumplings. Actually, they make a better broth than the other one because it kind of thickens it. We're living in Florida and had our neighbors over for chicken and dumplings. So we had the flat ones, which in our family we call sliders because they just go down really easy. And their little son, he must have been about 10 or 12, he looked at those drop dumplings and he said, those look like mashed potatoes gone bad. And probably the other one, German pasta, is called Rieblings. And in Germany, in the Black Forest, it's kind of made the same way, in egg and flour. They kind of make a very stiff dough and then grate it into the soup. In our family, we always took our fingers and you take egg and flour and you just keep rubbing it till you get little pieces of dough. And in our family, Saturday night was soup night. We had a big Revere pot. Mom canned tomatoes all summer, vegetables. We had our own beef from the farm, and she would make beefy vegetable soup. When you have 6 boys, you need to make things go a little further, so she would put Rieblings in there. And you can still get, sometimes we call them Rieblings with a B, but I really don't know how to pronounce it in German. In Germany, they tend to put them in a milk-based soup rather than a broth soup like we do. But you can still get those at Ciro's.
Or my house.
Or
Your mommy's oxtail soup that died for.
So somebody mentioned German meats. Well, good old Oberle sausage. My little granddaughter, when she was 4, I always have to send her meat products when we go to their house. She would eat it for breakfast, and she'd call it Overly dog. And actually, the word dog, I wanted to research that one time. Where did that come from? Well, I think the earliest newspaper reference was like in the 1940s. They were having a police chief's convention here, and one guy wrote that I come here, I got to get the Overly dog. And somebody had asked, it was either Butch Collier or one of them, those guys that made it one day, why aren't there any dogs in the neighborhood? And I just smiled. But I grew up playing softball for dog. Losers had to buy, had a few soda pops with foam on top and that sort of thing with it. But overly sausage is another thing that just says St. Genevieve. My brother was going out to, my brothers were having a little group together, or get together in Cannon Beach, Oregon. And so one of my brothers was taking my brother Tom 4 sticks of overly sausage, and he had them in his suitcase. And when Linda can tell you, when you go through TSA with overly sausage, you will be checked every time. Well, he goes in there, and the guy opens it up, and he looks and says, "Where's the cheese?" They must get a lot of overly sausage from TSA. The smoked pork loin is kind of, there's a German smoked pork chop that they, and that's a similar kind of thing. I did an article for Missouri Folklore on growing up with German foods. We ate a lot of German food as kids, even though sometimes they had American names, but they sure had German roots. Mom used to make breaded pork chops, very much like a schnitzel. And I'm glad to see that Audubon's has a schnitzel, and it's a credible schnitzel. When Linda and I first went to Germany, neither of us really spoke any German, but she knew she could always order schnitzel at home, Fritz. And we went to a place in Austria. It was very famous for their schnitzel. They had like a 9 or 10 inch plate, and the schnitzel kind of hangs over the edge. And about a year ago, Jim Baker was in Vienna, and he faxes, or he sends me a picture on my phone. He says, "Look what I'm eating." I said, "Oh, you're at Fingermüller's, aren't you?" And he was. So again, on the right, sausage and sauerkraut. I mean, to me, that was, when growing up, when Mom made pork and sauerkraut with potatoes, that was my comfort food. In Germany, it's called Schuhkrut Garni in Alsace, and just across the border, it's sauerkraut Alsace. But you get it with like either 4 or 8 kinds of meat on it. And my brother Tom was over there, and I just ordered the 4, and he hardly ate the whole thing. And then the waitress came over and said, "I admire you," because it's quite a meal. Down on the lower left is Blutwurst, blood sausage. I grew up on that. You can still get it at Oberle's. It's a little different than the kind I like. Not anymore? They couldn't do it.
I didn't let me go for it, and they won't make it anymore.
Well, we used to get it from various people around here. On New Year's Eve, my mom always had to have Blutwurst and pickled herring. Sounds rather strange. But there is some rationale as to why you eat pork and sauerkraut and fish around New Year's. You eat the pork because a pig cannot walk backwards. It's a looking forward thing. You eat the fish like a sardine or a herring because the fish can't swim backwards. You were looking forward into the next year. So we kind of had to change our tradition because we can't get good burst anymore. So we just have, we usually have a dinner of pork and sauerkraut and potatoes and a few drinks of schnapps on New Year's Day. In the middle, I couldn't even find regular Oberle's head cheese, which was called Schwarzenmagen in German. They all had various names, and they would actually take the pig's head and use all the meat off of it, throw in a couple of trotters or the feet for the gelatin, and make a head cheese. It's not one of my wife's very favorite kinds of things. In fact, when we first got married, I bought some prepackaged head cheese, and I was upstairs getting dressed, and she was making my lunch. She was very good at doing that. And I come downstairs, and she's got 2 forks. She won't touch it. And we used to just gross her out. When my brother would come to town when we lived in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of Amish markets there, city markets, and we'd go get pumpernickel, head cheese, or cup cheese, which, what do you call it, look like? Snot. And head cheese, and make sandwiches, and just, we were in heaven. So people still make head cheese at home. Some you don't make them out of, you can make them out of things other than the head. And on the right is liver sausage or leberwurst. Again, that's still one of my favorites, and even my kids like that.
I just thought of another traditional food that you find in around St. Genevieve, and it's even rare to find it in St. Louis, is a pork steak.
Yes, yeah.
Believe it or not, you go to any other part of the country and ask for pork steak, and they look at you like,
When we lived in Florida, one time a year, you would see them come into the meat counter. And that was it. I mean, you're right, that's a St. Louis, St. Genevieve area. They didn't have them in Kansas City, didn't have them in Pennsylvania, didn't have them in Florida where we lived. Some other German foods. On the left is fried potatoes, Bratkartoffeln in German. Actually, that's one thing that my kids would rather have Linda make than me. They just don't like the way when I add the onions. It's a big fight in our family when we add the onions. But you can still get those at the Brick and at the Anvil, and those are very good. And I had to throw in one called the white meal. And that kind of started from one of our religious traditions that you couldn't eat. We were mostly Catholic around here, and you couldn't eat meat on Friday, any time during the year. And now it's just a few days during Lent. But so it became a tradition. You could make spätzle or noodles, and I don't know how Mom got away with this, but she would fry them with croutons and in lard, which was not, I don't think that was legal. But then you made navy beans or Great Northern beans. And here you serve them with stewed tomatoes, and maybe some fish or something for a Friday meal. Ours was a little different. We lived on a farm, we worked hard. Ours was beans, noodles, and potato salad. If you want a carb load, that'll do it. So you put the noodles down, you put the beans on top, put the potato salad on top of that, throw a little hot sauce on it, and you're in heaven.
white beans and vinegar.
That's another tradition that we kind of lost, but the Germans always add a touch of vinegar to dishes. It adds a little bit of taste to it. It really brightens it up. So try that sometime. Add a little bit to your soup, and you'd be amazed at what happens. They had, since we don't butcher hogs like we used to, they would always do something called Saueressen, which means sour eating in German. And they would take various parts and cook it up with vinegar, and that was one of their dishes. I was in Zell-Weierbach, Germany, which is kind of a sister city to our Zell, and I was with a couple of friends from over there that lived there. And this one friend ordered a salad with sour liver on it. I've never seen that before, but that's kind of that typical German. Most of our Germans came from southwest Germany in the Black Forest or in Alsace, which is sometimes German. So we have a lot of our food traditions come from them. Oberlies came from a place called Salzbach by Ottern, and they were what's German called Metzgerei. But they brought their sausage first recipe with them, and it's really done well. Some people around here still make German gingerbread, Lebkuchen, or Pfeffernusse, which is a pepper cookie. There's all kinds of, I have a friend that makes something called the German cookie, and she got it from her grandmother, who got it from her grandmother. And down on the right, I think, Roger, you probably made a few of these in your day. Those are called Hutzelbrot. And it's a German fruit cake. Hutzel is a dried pear this is a kind of a Schwabian Black Forest thing, but it's like a fruit cake. And Tony Zaranella used to make up to 1,200 of those at Christmas time. There are still people that eat them. Oh, yeah,
Poor Tony.
Yeah, poor Tony. And people would come from St. Louis and buy them.
Yeah.
Much better than fruitcake. Yeah. He still makes it.
Yeah, it's really nice that if you go around, every once in a while I'll throw out something on, there's one of the Facebook pages, what's happened or what happened in St. Genevieve or something. You just throw a subject out there and you get all kinds of people that come back that tell you about their special family tradition. And I love that because there's an overall umbrella of Hutzelbrot, but there are subsets of that are family traditions. Now, the worst one is liver dumplings. You cannot not get two families to agree on how to make liver dumplings, what kind of liver, pork, beef, chicken, mixtures of those. So, and they're really protected. I mean, I've been after a couple, you know, like Tony Zarinelli's peanut coffee cake.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't, that, yeah, hard to get. So that's kind of our German heritage. So since we started out as French, we have some French food traditions. There was a young boy that was sent here from Pittsburgh in 1793 to learn French. His father was a judge in Pittsburgh, and his name was Henry Marie Breckenridge. And he came and he stayed with Joseph Vital St. Genevieve Beauvais, whose house is still here. And he lived here for 3 years. When he got here, he only knew 2 words of French, oui and no. And when he left, he had forgotten how to speak English, but he learned it again. And later on, he wrote a book called Recollections of Persons and Places in the West. And it's one of our true glimpses into St. Genevieve in the 1790s. He described the house, he described Mr. Beauvais, described some of the foods. And one of them, he said, they eat gumbos and fricassees, a dish, or fricassees and gumbos. The gumbos are a dish derived from the Africans. So one of the things, St. Genevieve has never been purely French or purely German. We have been a confluence of cultures. We had Native Americans very early on. We had 35% of our population in the colonial days was Africans, or African Americans. We had Americans come in here during the colonial period, some Germans. So it's never been purely one kind of society like if you would find in Japan or something like that. We've had all these cultures coming together and we get foods from each other. And that's important. And we learn things like, if you're going to make a gumbo at the end, you put a little filet powder on it. And filet is ground up sassafras leaves. So that was a dish that they still make here. There was a girl that lived next door to my house, and we found a copy of her journal. And they made gumbo out of duck and various other things. This is the 1930s. So gumbos are kind of coming back again, etouffees. The other friend of mine brought me some crawfish, and so I wanted to decide I want to make some crawfish etouffee. And Linda's watching me make this. She's a little apprehensive. She ate it. It was good. So over on the right, you have something called pain perdu. I can't say the French word for bread, but it's French toast. It means lost bread. Because it's old bread, you dip it in egg, you can fry it. The Germans do it, but they call it Army Ritter for some reason, some kind of knife. But down in the lower left, you have sugared pecans. All the cultures use those pecans that are here from St. Genevieve, and we are blessed with some wonderful tasting pecans. When a Kosovo, the French militia from Koke come here, Linda would always make a pecan pie. They were always after, what's your recipe? And she'd go, well, it's on the back of a taro syrup bottle. What's your thing for your crust? She said, oh, that's from the store in
Pillsbury, roll and place.
It is the St. Genevieve pecan. That little, it's like a wild blackberry versus a soft shell, or a tame blackberry. So our pecans have a peculiar taste, and they're just wonderful in pecan pie.
They got more oil.
Is that what it is?
That's what it is. You see a bag of pecans in paper bag, they got all the rings around it. That's what you want. Don't have oil, go to the bag.
But unfortunately, pecan trees are very cyclical. Some one year I got none, and then one year I got 200 pounds off a tree. I mean, it's crazy how it goes. But they do have a very good taste. In the middle is croquignoles, which is every culture seems to have a fried bread. My dad said he was growing up that his mom would make bread, they'll roll it out, cut little rectangles, and then deep fry it. So they kind of puff up. and then they would put a hole in it, put beans in there. That's another carb loader. When you're working on a farm, you need a lot of carbs. Other things that the French made are pralines out of the pecans again, and panouche. My mom made that. It's a candy with pecans in it. And somebody mentioned bouillon. You know, not many, the French and the German didn't mix really well. The Germans, we had some here in the 1780s, 1800, the Herzogs in about 1820, but 1832 we started getting this influx of Germans, mostly from the Black Forest. There were about 10 or 12 families. And that really went on up all the way to the 1880. But one thing they really took from the French was something called bouillon. And bouillon is you would take an old hen, an old rooster, and grandma would go out and wring its neck and bring it in, and you would boil it in a big pot with vegetables. A lot of people put them in a cloth bag so it didn't spread out in the broth. And the chicken was in there, and when it was cooked, you would take the chicken and the vegetables out, and first you served the broth. And you would drink that, and then you would have the vegetables and the chicken. Some people make chicken salad out of it. That was one of the things I put out on Facebook one time. I got some really different family traditions. Some people made it all with vegetables. One of the things in the French, a bouillon is not only a dinner, a dish, it is a party. We're going to a bouillon. And they served bouillon in a lot of the restaurants here. They would have bouillon parties, fundraisers, the La Guillenée, after they would run the Guillenée, they would go back and have a dinner and have bouillon. They make it with clear broth, and I had one aunt that made it with tomato juice in it. And there are restaurants here that serve red bouillon and some that serve white bouillon. Like I said, my aunt had the red one. Well, I had my uncle, Charlie Weber, who was Carl, I'm sure you knew Charlie. He had a different recipe than his sister in the same family. We never could figure that out, but I still make bouillon at Christmas time. A lot of times that is a family Christmas tradition to have bouillon. One of the other traditions was that the best bouillon came from a chicken from your neighbors. And that was not only in St. Genevieve, I found it in Cahokia. There would be articles in the newspaper in around 1910, watch out, it's bouillon time, protect your chickens. Well, the tradition was to not only take your neighbor's chicken and make a bouillon, but you had to invite him over for the bouillon. And his role was to say, this is the best bouillon I ever had. Al Kaiser had a chicken kind of come into his yard, and so he finally had it adopted him, and he got a cage for her and everything. And he called her Emily, I just called her bouillon. And I think there's kind of a new tradition starting in St. Genevieve. To me, it started with the old flash.
Yeah.
Remember
Yes.
yeah, it was like a cube, I think, and they were fine cut. Those were really good. And I've been trying to get that recipe out of Cindy Overly, and that's not working either. But onion rings, who's best? Ciro's, the Anvil. You know, I think one day we should have an onion ring walk.
Challenge or something.
And you just go from place to place to vote on who has the best onion rings.
I had the onion straws at Audubon's last night, and they were real thin.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of fell in love with them because, I mean, those are good, but I don't know, less is more. They were real thin.
Yeah, that's kind of, I remember up at the Flash, they were kind of a lot thinner than what we did.
There was light growth in it.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Audubon's doing, yeah.
Well, one of the other things that is kind of traditional around here, and we think of the modern farmers market, but it's been around here for a long time. How we know about what happened in St. Genevieve is usually, in the old days, is from travel writers. The people here didn't keep diaries that we have. The records aren't getting down to what's really happening, so we read these guys like Henry Breckenridge, Christian Schultz and others, but there was a guy named Thomas Ashe who came here in 1806. He said the present population principally consists of Canadian, French, and Anglo-Americans. There are 3 public buildings, a church, federal court, and a market house. That's the first indication that we had a market house here in St. Genevieve, and that was around 1806. In 1812, the county court said they will build a market house 20 feet wide, 40 feet long on the public square, pillars to be of stone and a good shingle roof. They didn't actually build that one. I think they built the one a couple of years later that was 50 foot in length and 16 foot wide. And you can see in the model, this is from the diorama on the left. It's kind of to the right of the courthouse. You can see the old brick to the rear. So when Jim Baker built this or designed this model for the panorama, he was going off of those dimensions that we know about the market house. The other day he asked me, there was a drawing of St. Genevieve at some place that had next to the where the Chamber of Commerce is, it said there was the scales. Nobody knew what those scales were. Well, when farmers would bring stuff to town, they had to weigh the wagon empty and full, or filling empty, and they used public scales. The next market house, I've never really seen much on, but in 1851, the Rosiers donated land on, it would be on Washington and between Main and 2nd. You know where First School is? Yeah, well that was there. They donated a parcel of land running through block 11 from north to south from Washington and Jefferson Streets 100 feet upon the express condition that the city shall erect and build upon the parcel as soon as practical a good and substantial market house and other public buildings. The only public building we know about left is First School. In 1975, they proposed to build a marketplace where the Island of Flags is. That didn't happen. But in 1990, they moved behind Rosier's store in the parking lot back there. And they built that building, which was in the center there, in 1994. And I think I had to put another St. Genevieve tradition, Marianne Otto. I love, Saturday morning, I'd get up, I'd love to be at the market when it opened, but Marianne Otto would always be there. And she was just a bundle of joy, and she was always looking for blackberries to make cobbler. Unfortunately, she never made me a cobbler, as much as I begged her. But in 2011, they moved to their present position down at the KC Hall Pavilion. So that's a little bit about food. Let's talk about another St. Genevieve tradition, and that's sports. So it's kind of a look back at 15 years ago. Some of the data has now changed. Valley started football in 1928. They had just opened their high school a couple of years earlier. Their first game was against St. Vincent of Perryville, and they lost 70-0. Now you know why there is a rivalry between St. Vincent of Perryville and St. Brett Valley. In fact, my brother was on the team in 1965, and they only lost one game. I think it was by either 1 or 2 points to St. Vincent. And they still talk about that. Perryville is so proud. There was a book about Perryville, and there was like a 2-page spread on that game. So that's important to them.
When they played that first game, the reason why the score was so off, I knew 2 of the guys' dads that played on that team, and they Valley was told what the rules were. They didn't really know fully what the rules were developing, and they were told they had to run the football between the goalposts.
The Valley became known as the Warriors in 1933. St. Gen had its first football game in 1937. And what has become known as the Old Settlement football rivalry began on November 10th, 1957. There's been 60 of those. Charlie Herzog, by the way, scored the winning touchdown in that game. And somebody else scored 2, but all I remember was Charlie. If you talk to him, that's the only one you remember. But Valley's won that. They're ahead in the score, 34-26. Valley's a little more ahead in state titles. They now have 15, and I think they're first in the state now, are still tied with most football championships. They made it a little harder for them by moving up a couple of divisions because of their winning record. St. Gen has won 1 state playoff, but they've been there 19 times, so they also have a great tradition of football. Who can forget the 1966 Valley football team? They scored 535 points against their opponents in nothing. I think on the last game they didn't even allow a first down. I mean, they were just dominant. And then actually, I think it was the other thing I remember. This is the 75th anniversary of KSGM, and they went on the air in the summer, and in September they started broadcasting St. Gen and Valley home games, and that's become a tradition to listen on the radio if you can't go to the game. So baseball is another tradition here. Baseball has been long a tradition, and we hear about them very early on. Even in like 1872, I think we had a team called the Resolutes. And the next year we had the Red Stockings. And the Fair Play had a team. Fair Play started in 1872, so 1873 is when they started playing. And you would see scores like 69-21. Kind of like a Cardinals game. I mean, that was crazy how many runs that they would score. But baseball has always been important here. We've had a lot of teams, Legion Ball, that they go and win championships. We've had good coaches. Steve Beezer has done well. And we've had a couple of people that have played the bigs like Steve. And they come out of these baseball teams, and a lot of times a baseball would be just a pickup game at some barnyard or go down to the Corey League field. And if you didn't have enough guys, you would play Indian ball. I don't think kids even know how to play Indian ball anymore. When I was growing up, there was cart ball and bottle cap baseball. So we had all those that you did. It wasn't as organized as what we have now, but it was a chance to get out and play. In some kind of rules, everybody made up their own rules, and that's what made it fun. But you could play baseball and get a group of kids, and you left in the morning after breakfast, and you came home for lunch, and then when the street lights came on, you better be coming home. Unfortunately, our world's changed, and so we don't have that much anymore. now have some wonderful baseball fields. In the early days, they would play out at Roser Park. Anybody know where that was?
CVS.
Where CVS is, yep. And there was a bandstand that the KCs had out there. They would have their early county fairs out there. But that's where baseball teams would come. They'd bring them in from St. Louis. I think the Resolutes on their first game, they lost it to a team from St. Mary's, but they complained that St. Mary's brought in a couple of ringers from Dozaville on the island, which would not be unheard of.
Who was on that 29 Yanks team?
I don't have a list of that. That's I mean, it's just great that these traditions of sports continue in our town. Volleyball is another one that it started in Valley in 1929, so it's been around for a long time. They became known as the Lady Warriors in 1980. St. Gen was known as the Dragonettes in 1936, but during that legendary time period of Peggy Johnson, they became known as the Headhunters. What a name. And even I think the track and field team took up the name Headhunters. I think they wanted to be like Peggy's team. You really can't forget the 1980 or 1979, 1980 time period. Peggy was 30-0, or St. John was 30-0-1 in 1979. The next year they went 26-1-1 and won the state championship. That same year, Valley went 33-3-1 and won the state championship in their division. So here we had this little town, and we had two state championships at the same time, the same sport. So I think 1980 was really a miraculous year. Nancy Fisher just passed coaching 300 games, which is awesome. So I think that having that kind of tradition is important. I think Mike Boyd mentioned green and white. I think the first time I ever saw about green was about 1913. And it was there's something about a green and white at a dance. Most people don't know that about 1926 they had a basketball team. They were called the Green Dogs. And the girls' team was called the White Poodles. I'm glad they changed that. Dragons is a much better name than the White Poodles. So, any other sports traditions that you might think of that we have here?
Bob, was there a year that football won state, the same year as well?
No, I think St. John's only won one year. Right. And Valley, there was a time period there that they just went, I think they won 4 out of 5 years in a row.
I could be wrong, but I thought the year St. and Dragons won state, I thought Valley won state.
It was fall of 92.
They did, they called, and there were St. Louis newspaper articles about Titletown.
Okay, great, I learned something there.
They made national news that year.
Probably.
At one time, Valley had the longest winning streak in the nation too. I mean, that's pretty awesome. And they played well, playing up 2 divisions. I mean, they went to state even on that. I think that's a tradition in Valley, and kids growing up, you get ready for football and you work and you learn to play the game and you learn to win. It's kind of expected, and it's a tradition of winning. So I mentioned volleyball. Some new sports traditions that are kind of starting. Cross country. St. Genevieve's kind of a powerhouse. A couple of coaches really got into it. The Werner girl really did well nationally. And both Valley and St. Gen girls, especially, do well in cross country. A new sport is wrestling, boys and girls, and that program is beginning. And as they start winning and going to state and having people recognized as champions, that will also grow as a tradition. You know, when I talked about baseball, it was mostly the boys playing, and girls started playing softball later on. And I know in the 1970s there were a lot of like an intramural team that people, they had leagues here and everything. But Valley won the state championship. I think that's the first state championship. It was this year for girls from St. Genevieve to win in softball. Pretty awesome. I hope that leads them into doing better things too. Anything else on sports that you can think of? I mean, the problem we have now is there's so many different sports that kids can, basketball, football, track, cross country, baseball. I don't know how they do it. It's amazing. And just, we have a lot of good athletes here. Here's the kind of a sport, and it's a tradition that when you kill your first deer or your first turkey, you get your picture in the paper. I don't think it would fly in St. Louis, I'm sorry, but hunting is still a tradition here, and teaching your kids how to handle guns properly, how to hunt properly, and what to do with the game when you kill it, is something that has been a part of our tradition for many, many years here. When turkeys were reintroduced, St. Genevieve County became the leading state for harvesting wild turkeys, and now they're prevalent throughout southern Missouri. We also, for many years, led the state in deer. We have a lot of deer out there. And so, I guess when you're young and you get your first one, you get your picture in the paper. I think that's a great tradition. So I'm going to switch into something else. Music, I think, has been a tradition in St. Genevieve from the very beginning. This is Dennis Stromat and his wife, Jennifer. State, and he got interested in what we call Upper Louisiana fiddle music, and he went to old mines and he stayed there for like 3 years learning to play from guys like Pete Boyer, who play by ear, and they play all these songs. And so that song is about going to a bouillon party when you finally get the words. That's again what we call is Upper Louisiana fiddle music, and it's not Cajun, it's not Quebecois, which up in Canada, there's differences. I think it's a very danceable music, and so one of the things that was mentioned was, as a tradition, was the La Guyanée. It's also pronounced Guyanée, Guioni, Ignoé. I found a whole bunch of different references to that. But that is a tradition that came to Canada from Normandy, and they say it supposedly goes back to the Druids. But then when most of our early settlers that came here were French Canadians, the Europeans that came here, and they brought the Guyanée with them. And they brought the traditions and the words, and this goes back, am I done? So the gist of the song was, well, these people would go from door to door. You can see down in the lower left, this came from the Illinois thing. And by the way, this area was called the Illinois country, the Continental Illinois, on both sides of the river. Even after the British took over what is now Illinois, we were called the Illinois country here. So sometimes it gets a little confusing, but the French had similar traditions. St. Genevieve started because the French Canadians who lived across the river started coming over here. In the Guyanée, it's a traditional song where you have a leader, and then you have a chanting, and then you have people that do a return or part of the song. And it's called Running the Guyanée, Courier de la Guyanée. And down in Louisiana, they have a thing called Running the Mardi Gras, Courier de Mardi Gras. And there, the people dress up like they do here, only they dress up looking like birds. They have feathered pieces of cloth looking like feathers. And they ride on horses and wagons, and they ride from house to house begging for food for the boot or the gumbo that evening. But what the tradition is they throw a chicken out and the guys have to go chase and get it. There's usually a lot of mud around. But it's really strange that we have some of these similar customs. So they're a little different. They're similar between the running of the Guiana here and the running of the Mardi Gras down there. I think I got a little bit. Hear it on YouTube, and it's complete. It's a lot different. That was actually a record that the Guiana singers made one time.
We had one when I was a kid. We bought one.
I have recordings from Prairie du Rocher, Bloomsdale. Zell had a German one. They sang it in German. It wasn't always traditionally a male Guiana. Though it's only recently that females were in the St. Genevieve Guiana. But in the war years, the women would run the Guiana. The children from out of what was known as the Kell School, which was out on White Sands Road, one year they ran the Guiana. And a couple of years we had African American Guianas. Somebody said it must have been strange to hear, the Africans that became enslaved here, and some of them free, speaking French. We have all these cultures coming together, and so these traditions get passed from group to group. But I think the Guiana is one of our longest standing traditions in St. Genevieve, and I'm glad that they still do it every year. In the early days, they would go to house, and the song goes, "Oh, Master and Mistress, we're sorry about that we're interrupting your evening, but can we have a side of beef 90 feet long for the dinner?" But then they go on to say, if they can't get that, can we have the eldest daughter to dance the night away? Which would always scare the heck out of the eldest daughter. But that's kind of going back to some of that Druid stuff. And now I think there's more German descendants in the Guiana than there are French, and I'm not sure they understand the words, but they sure can sing it, and they get better the more lubricity they get during the evening. Yeah. School songs. I'm still trying to find out when they started, the tradition of them, but each school has one. Valley's was called the Pet song, according to Sarah, and it goes way back. I think the St. Jen's song is a little newer. I found this on YouTube. There's one little boy that watch what he does. He's on YouTube forever. Songs have always been, or music's always been popular here. It is, Thomas Ashe again wrote, he says, after putting in an inn run by a lively Frenchman, the Green Tree, he wrote, I lounged through the village and chatting and passing with the inhabitants, who were all in groups outside their doors. The women at work, the children at play, and the men performing music, singing songs, or telling stories. He went on to write, hence I have heard the guitar resound soon after sunset with the complaints and amorous tales of the village swains, heard the same hand which toiled all day in the wilderness spoke the tender notes of love and evening. What a passage. Songs about St. Genevieve. The earliest one that I could find was something called Voyage à Saint-Geneviève, an old French tune that actually Dennis Stromek has it on one of his albums, so it means voyage to traveling to St. Genevieve. And then in about 1852, 1855, there was a lady who wrote the St. Genevieve Iron Mountain Quick Step. And, you know, we had the plank road from here to Iron Mountain, and Al Kaiser says it's a terrible song, hard to play, but that was an early song. Then in the 1935, when we had our bicentennial, Minnie Day, who was, I call her, she was a music teacher here. She taught kindergarten. She wrote music, and she wrote a song called The Spirit of St. Genevieve for the bicentennial. And then later, Bill Simon, who's another St. Genevieve native, wrote the song St. Genevieve, and it was adopted, I think, in 2013 as the town song. He wrote several Christmas songs and other things. So, I want to see if I can play one of these. This is Linda Tyrell's song, and she, this was on an album she released in 2003. Susie Tyrell was with the E Street Band with Bruce Sings string. That song she wrote after the '93 flood, and it's about the rain and will it end. And she actually sang it with Bruce Springsteen in Asbury Park, New Jersey. There's another song, and I can't, my flipper can't do it, but the latest one is one called Genevieve by a lady named Jackie Treco, and it starts out about getting down to exit 154 or 150, and it's like a coming home kind of thing. There's another song that was written called Tear-Stained Eye by a group called Sun Volt, and I recommend you kind of look these guys up. They were a St. Louis band. A guy named Jay Farrar wrote this song, Tear-Stained Eye, and it's again, it was released in 1993, and it's a group that nobody knows a lot about, but I really highly recommend it.
The Community Band plays Dear with St. John at our last concert every year.
Right.
We make sure we have that in there.
How many people have played in the band here? Anybody else?
I did in high school.
Well, very good. You can always go back.
I wouldn't have.
Susie, what did you play?
Trumpet and French horn.
We need trumpets and French
I haven't touched one in decades.
You'll be fine.
I'll talk to John.
Anybody
Maybe
play
by next
football? Did you play football? Nick, did you play football?
Back in the 80s,
Yeah.
79, graduated in 79.
Okay. This was kind of a fun project. When you get into history, you get into strange things. You ask yourself stupid questions like, what songs are about St. Genevieve? Goes into the research. Bands have always been popular here. There was the 1874 Amateur String Band. We luckily have some pictures of these guys. And also 1874 Amaro String Band. Yeah, that's the Force Band there. That's in 1895. There's in the middle there is a group of young people, the various groups around here. I think they did 2 in 1 year, which had that small or juvenile bands. And in fact, in 1929, the St. Genevieve Juvenile Band went down to Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and they met John Philip Sousa as he got off the train. And later in the day, he directed the St. Genevieve Band. And in one of the newspaper articles, it said, Lieutenant Commander Sousa and the band were met at the Frisco Rail Station by the American Legion Drum and Bugle Corps, the Cape Girardeau Municipal Band, and the St. Genevieve Juvenile Band and Citizens. So our music tradition goes way back. In fact, we have the names, I think, someplace on here of most of the guys that were in that juvenile band. Town and school bands have also been important. As you mentioned, the Muni Band, it was formed in 1946. In 1949, they passed a band tax, and then as it sunsetted, they passed it again, and we still have it. And it supports the people playing, plus they give grants every year for various things like French Festival and other festivals for continuation of St. Genevieve's music tradition. When they started out, they didn't play in the desert behind Valley School. They would actually play at various venues like Roser Park. They played down at St. Mary's. They could play, at Zell. If there was a picnic, they'd show up and they would play. In 1957, they decided they were going to go behind Valley School. And I don't know if they went in the same location where they are now, kind of in that corner, or they went behind the gym where they had the steps.
On the steps.
So I did see a picture of that when they were there.
And people used to sit in cars and honk their horns.
But that's what I was going to say. I think one of the most endearing St. Genevieve traditions is when I said, Linda, let's go up and hear the community band. We go up and sit down, and there's only cars behind us, and if you like the music, you honk your horn. We'd never seen that before, but I think they still do it, and it's still a great tradition. In 1989, the community band introduced the Festival of Carols during the Christmas Festival. And I think another tradition, it's not just a St. Genevieve tradition, but when they play Handel's Messiah, everybody stands. I mean, that's a moving thing. We have school bands. I think the thing that intrigued me about the school bands is that when you have homecoming, you have both schools in the parade. I think that, again, is a mark of support in our community that the kids do that. The Valley band is getting smaller and smaller, unfortunately, but they've had a great tradition, too. We've had the German band down in the lower left-hand corner. I think Bob Dunzy started one in 1967, and then the German band started up pretty much after that. They play at Jour de Fête. They've been a fixture there ever since. They play at the American Legion for the Memorial Day and other parades. So that's a little bit about music. I want to talk about dancing. This is a tradition that's kind of went away. And I'll talk about some of our past ones, and then I'll kind of theorize why I think it's went away. But this is the first mention of a ball in St. Genevieve was in 1767. A Spanish commandant, Francisco Riu, had brought some soldiers up to St. Louis to man the fort, and they didn't have enough food up there. That's why they were called Pancourt, short of bread. They call St. Genevieve misère, misery, but they did send some guys down to get some food. And while one of the guys was here, he went to a dance, and he gave a doubloon to a lady, and he gave another doubloon to another lady, and he got in trouble when he got back to St. Louis, and that's the first mention I've seen of a ball in St. Genevieve. Balls have been traditional here. Breckenridge, that little boy, said that after the afternoon mass, I sometimes went with other children to the ball, which was by no means a place of frivolity, but rather a school of manners. The children of the rich and poor were placed on footing of perfect equality, and the only difference was the more costly but not cleaner or neater the dress. The strict decorum and propriety was preserved by parents who were present. So that's something that happened during the French period with the kids learning how to dance, but also how to learn manners. John Reynolds, who wrote something called The History of Illinois, he says the French generally, and the early Creoles particularly, were passionately fond of dancing. The gay and merry disposition of the French adopted this mode of social amusement. To enjoy the dancing salon was almost a passion among the early French, and for the enjoyment of which they made many efforts. All classes, ages, and degrees assembled together and made one large family in these ballrooms. The aged would at times dance, but they performed the higher duty. They kept an eye sharp and searching over the giddy youth, and frequently the priest went to make sure things were going okay. Grand March, and we had the same band for almost 20-some years, and last year we had Dennis Stroman in a different color, and they changed it around a little bit. So the grand dance is a little bit different, but one of the guys wrote, if I can find that, it was something about that the old people would have the first dance, and they'd dance the minuet, the dance of the court, and then they'd let the youngsters get the door. But sometime through the evening, one of the older couples would take the floor. So the King's Ball is traditionally, in modern days, you find a baby Jesus in the cake, and that's you're chosen as the king. In the late 1980s, we started having Queen's Balls on leap years. And that was, so we do that now every 4th year. And we didn't always have a King's Ball here. That kind of got resurrected when we had Jour de Fête starting in 1966. And they used to have the dance up in the desert. They had it at the JD Valley House one year. And down to Casey Hall, but finally they decided on the DFW Hall. We've had it ever since. There's been some strange things happen. One year it was a Queen's Ball, and they couldn't find anybody to admit they had the baby Jesus. One time a girl who was visiting from someplace else had it, and who she was with said, "Well, go ask that guy to be your king." Well, they ended up getting married. We have a false king. We had one guy get the name. I will not tell the names to protect the guilty, but the guy didn't want to be king, so he gave it to another person who has since decided he wanted to be king for life, a tradition. And so now they have to number the baby Jesus in a special way because he kept the first one. So I will not say the name, but it's very. We have a junior attendance, senior attendance, and in the 1990s, they started also giving out awards called the Chevalier and Madame of Ste. Genevieve, special recognition for people. One of the things I knew that a lot of the research were looking back in the newspaper, which is very fun as a historian. One of the things I noticed is on weekends, they have a lot of dances around here. I mean, bunches of them. This is in one paper, it's got 2 weeks. And you can see that they're at the Rock Tavern, the Celine Club, the Rock Tavern again, the New Offenburg Hall, Midway Cafe had it every Saturday night, and then they had something at Genevieve Tavern. So I mean, it was, that's what, when my dad, he was from Farmington at the time, and he was dating my mother, they would go dancing all the time. They would go to the Boat at Chester. They would go to the Rock Tavern, which is out on 61. There's a Red Barn out on Highway B that they would go to. You know, a guitar, a fiddle, and a bass guy would get together, and they would have dances. They didn't have all the entertainment that we have now, and the availability of entertainment. So if they wanted to hear music, they either had to listen to the radio or they had to go listen to live bands. And we had a lot of them. We had a lot of good ones. Each one of these is a different band. So.
Bob, do you know where the New Offenburg Hall was located?
I think it was right on the road there. The old road, when it was the plank road, went right through the old New Offenburg, through the town.
Right.
But I'd have to look. I think we have a plat map of New Offenburg. I'll have to look at that.
Just curious, yeah.
The other thing we had was something called wedding dances. It's a tradition that has unfortunately died out. It started way back, I think the first one I found was 1908. They were having a wedding, and they decided to open up the dance to the public. And then you start seeing different ones. I think there was one there. It didn't even say who was getting married. It just said we're having a wedding dance. And you paid admission, and you got to dance. And sometimes you got to have a dance or a drink that you probably shouldn't have had either at the time if you would want, you know. But we had all different kinds, 1930, 1935. I think the last ones I saw was one in 1985 at Bloomsdale. And again, it didn't say who was getting married. It just said, we're having a wedding dance. And so that tradition's kind of died out. And couples, I know our friends Bob and Bert just said they almost paid for their weddings with the money that you got from going to the wedding dance. And it was a Saturday night thing. Everybody went to the BFW or the Legion, and even if you didn't know the couple, you had a lot of fun. So that's a little bit about dancing. It was once very popular. Now it isn't. And I kind of theorized that the reason is now we have so much access to music that we don't need to go listen to somebody in a live band. And the dancing's kind of changed. I kind of always enjoyed having a slow dance with a girl. I mean, that was, in modern dancing, that just don't do that.
High school dances now rarely, like if you have to chaperone a high school dance, you're standing there, it is loud, fast music the whole time. You might get maybe 3 slow songs where you see the couple dancing, but you don't even see the couple dancing anymore. You'll see a whole group of kids just rocking back and forth together. Like, it's all that party music now. It's just not those slow, that's gone.
I remember high school with CYO dances. Bob Cuban and the Ed Men used to come down to Farmington and play, and they'd have dances out at the Legion, and it was a lot of fun. And I mean, as a young boy, I was kind of nervous to ask a girl to dance.
And this isn't specific to St. Genevieve. I know they did this everywhere, but I miss, like, when I was a kid, square dancing in school. That was so fun. I remember doing that in the gym and, you know, about your partner and all that. That was so fun.
Yeah,
And it was a great workout.
So I'm going to kind of move into something, traditions of holidays and festivals. There's a difference. A holiday is a day we set aside to celebrate an individual or an event. And normally you get off work, either partially off work or you get off school. Festivals, on the other hand, are where the town celebrates its heritage, a religious thing, or its culture. And it's kind of a bringing together thing. And so we're going to talk about some of St. Genevieve traditional festivals and holidays, and I'm going to kind of mix them up. Easter, it was always a tradition to wear a hat for Easter Sunday. That happens to be my mother. That's your mom? That's my mom, and her, what we call her spaceship hat. She loved hats, and she was a beautiful lady.
I'm looking at that picture.
I think we were probably living on it was probably 50s, something like that. She was about 40 something. One of the other traditions that we had here was coloring Easter eggs with onion skins. And we still, Country Mart saves onion skins. I save onion skins. And some people are very creative. They put plants around them and boil them in onion skins to get the brown. You can use blueberries for blue, turmeric, beets. You can get different colors for the Easter eggs. And the other thing that is kind of a tradition is the Lions Club Easter egg hunt. That started in the 1930s, soon after the Lions Club formed. And it was originally held on DuPont Hill. And this is a picture of my cousin. This is like early 1950s, like 1952. And they had different age groups. They had like 1,400 eggs that they could put out. And you can see later they moved in the 50s out to the Pier Marquette. And you can see that they would really kind of have a run for the eggs. I saw in one newspaper where a little girl came back and she not only had eggs, she had a little buggy she caught. Flowers and garden tours have always been popular. Breckenridge, that little boy said, there was a spacious garden enclosed with pickets in the same manner with the yard. It was indeed a garden in which the greatest variety and the finest vegetables were cultivated, intermingled with flowers and shrubs. The French love to put flowers in with their kitchen garden at Jardin Potager, and Jardin Agrément is one that has flowers in it, kind of has some beauty to it. Mrs. Shudo up in St. Louis sent a rose to Mrs. Valley around 1810, and you still have a rose garden in the J.B. Valley house. The New York Times reported in 1884 that boatmen going by St. Genevieve at night, they knew they were there because they could smell the flowers. The Fleur de Lis Club was founded in 1949. The club flower was the lavender iris. In 1989, the historic houses began offering a free guided tour of their gardens on weekends during May. But then it kind of morphed into a herb fest at the Old Oak House in 1995 at the Main Street Inn. And it started being called Garden Walk in 2000. So that's been a pretty long tradition. It's now run by the Master Gardeners. The Hill and Dale Garden Club in Bloomsdale's been active for a lot of years. They have demonstrations, they have shows, they do these markers for the Blue Highway. They've done 3 of those as their sort of their projects and take care of them. One of the things that I found during COVID, it was a very difficult time for all of us, but somebody started calling it the virtual garden walk. And people would walk around town and take pictures of flowers and post them. So when we're kind of housebound, that was kind of neat. Talk about another holiday, well actually 3 of them. Decoration Day, Memorial Day, and Veterans Day. Decoration Day was always on May 30th. And it started after the Civil War. There have been a few little towns, and I think a town out east has not had the first one, but they would have a service for the people, the part of the people that were killed in the Civil War. So in 1868, Major General John Logan, who was from Murfreesboro, Illinois, and he was the commander of the Grand Army of the Republic, says, we're going to set aside May 30th for the decorating the graves with flowers. And that went on for years, and we didn't really start it here in St. Genevieve. In 1787, there were only 3 people that went to the cemetery. The newspaper complained about it. Well, the next year, you can see that picture on the left. That's from 1888, and that was the Decoration Day Parade, and they went to Memorial Cemetery and then to the new cemetery by that time out of Valley Springs to decorate people that had died. I'm part of the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, and we still celebrate Decoration Day on December 30th by planting flags of Civil War veterans in the 3 cemeteries. Actually, there's 4 to deal with. Then Memorial Day, Decoration Day was called Memorial Day by some people, after World War I, Decoration Day was not just Civil War soldiers, it was for Spanish-American War and World War I soldiers, remembering them. It became Memorial Day in 1971, so that's kind of a new thing. And it was declared it was going to be always on a Monday, and regardless of it was just May 30th. So that's kind of a little bit of history. Forerunner, well, we still do a Memorial Day service out at the VFW Hall. They have their line of flags. If you haven't been to that service, it's a very good service. It's Memorial Day is celebrating those who died in the service of the country. It's not veterans. We have another day for Veterans Day, and that really started out after World War I being known as Armistice Day. And it stayed Armistice Day. In 1938, it became a federal holiday. And some of the first services, they would just have a moment of silence for 2 minutes. And that was kind of the remembrance. But it's grown. In 1956, the Legion here asked everyone to fly the flag. And then in the 60s, they started having the Mass at Zell, followed by a parade and a service at the Legion Hall. Again, in every moving service, every year they recognize their members who have died in the past year. And it's a nice ceremony. Now we have the schools, Valley and St. John, have a parade for veterans the day before Veterans Day, which is on the 11th, and then have a meal for them. French Festival. We're kind of getting back to our roots. That really started on the 200th anniversary of this Bastille Day in 1989. They had a guillotine, movies, and special French foods. Now this is kind of one of those oxymorons. The French in St. Genevieve never believed in the French Revolution. We were royalists. Our little town just south was called New Bourbon after the Bourbon King. And there was even a law in Louisiana that said you couldn't support that because it was against the law. So, but we expect French, and the French Revolution is part of it. So for many years, that's what they have. The Foundation for Restoration sponsored it for many years, and in 1997, Les Amis, which was a group that was formed to help save the Emerald House, started having La Fête Française, and they ran for 3 years, and that was kind of a 3-day weekend: St. Louis, Cahokia, St. Genevieve. But then they discontinued it in 1989. And then we have a nice event with music, food, and different things. It's now in June. And we have the King and Queen come, or Marie Antoinette and King Louis XV, and have different events during town, march in a promenade. And the Felix Valley House for many years has had something called the La Ville, which was a gathering, and they'd have Dance Discovery do the old dances, and they would read stories from old mines, Missouri. There's a book by a lady, it's called It's Good to Tell You. And the French stories are always good. They're about animals, typically. Little Jean and his animal friends, or the half rooster. Poor Madeline's a bad one with a snake that eats her eyes. A couple other celebrations, the 4th of July. 1776 was the first one. St. Genevieve had its first 4th of July celebration in 1811. They met up on what's now Seraphim Street, probably not far from your house, Nick, and Barry. They fired a cannon. They went over to Fort Deschartres and got an old cannon. It would eventually burst during one of the celebrations later and hurt a few people. But they had 18 cheers that they did, and to various things like the Heroes of 76, and then they sang Yankee Doodle Dandy. They played Washington's March. They cheered Thomas Jefferson 3 times, commerce, domestic manufacturing. Then they took a break. I think they were having toast after each one of these. So then they played Hail Columbia, and they were pretty smart. Their last one was for the fair ladies. They were probably getting a little snotty by that time. They needed to be in good shape when they got home. But we've had the Freedom Celebration with the fireworks. That started by the Chamber in 1972. Chipper Bosler was in charge of it, and then in 1983, Mary Ann Otto started taking it over, and in the last few years, Gary Ross has been doing it. In 2014, we decided to start something called a Patriotic Fourth. Seems like the 4th of July has kind of devolved into picnics, and we just lost that patriotism part. And so we decided to have a partial reading of the Declaration of Independence, and some patriotic songs and that sort of thing. And it's been growing each year, and we're going to be doing it on July 1st this year, not the 4th, because they had moved the fireworks to the 1st, but then they moved the fireworks to the 2nd. But we're still having ours on the 1st. So please come out. 2 o'clock, we're going to have a promenade, and at 2:30 we'll have a little ceremony. We'll be behind the Lake Mueller House, which is down on Main and Merchant. Parish picnics are another festival kind of thing that go way back. These things are very early, and the churches would have these. The church was the community back in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s. They would have these picnics to raise money for schools, for a church, for a rectory. You see that in one of the very earliest ones in 1873. Ozora was doing it for the benefit of the congregation. But they were really, for a while, called homecomings, because people would come back together on that special day, have a good meal, have games and stuff, and and it was all for a good cause. And those things are still going on. we still have about all the communities still have them. I don't know if St. Mary's does, but Lawrencetown has it, and River of Laws, Weingarten. Everybody kind of has their favorite, but those are great gatherings, and it's a great tradition that goes back over 150 years. Jour de Fête's another one that started in 1966. They were looking for ways to improve tourism, and Great Francois proposed having a Jour de Fête, which means day of celebration, but it's actually 2 days. That's all right. And that over on the left is the first program from 1966, and they built some stands up in the courthouse square because my dad helped build those, and I remember him doing it in the backyard. And it's changed over the years. Back then they had a lot of crafts things. They would have dances. Again, the King's Ball would be held during Jour de Fête. Sometimes it wasn't who got the bean, it was who had the best costume. And Mickey Ketty won a bunch of times. That's why we had to change the rules. But the other thing that happened back before 2000 is the Project Pioneers started. And they honor each year a German family and a French family. And you can see the list of names, or family names that they've done over the years. And they've also done like the Brooks family and some African American families during that time period. But those are, the people come together to put these family genealogies together, and then they publish them, and it's been a great resource for St. Genevieve. County fairs, they go back, way back too. I don't know if you know it, we had a fairgrounds in the big field in 1875 with a racetrack, with a pagoda, and stands, and a ticket booth. And it only lasted a couple of years. But if you look, we have a list of all the premiums they paid for different things like the best cucumber or the best chicken. And it's really kind of neat looking at those. So those county fairs went on for a while, and then they kind of dropped off, and we started having township fairs. And we had 5 townships in St. Genevieve County, and each one would have their little local fair. And then back in the 1950s, they started up having the county fair again, and it was out at the old Rozier Park. And then later they moved it up to where it's at now, in the park, or the county part of the park where the county fair is held. They've always had some very unusual things. Back in the old days, they would have a greased pole, where you'd have to try to climb this greased pole and get a watch or overly sausage or something on top. Then we got into chasing a greased pig, and I think the ad said, be sure to have a second change of clothes for your kid. No, they had the cow chip contest, but it's still a lot of fun. They've introduced, the 4-H, as you know, I was involved in 4-H, and I took my pet cow to the fair in Farmington and slept there all night. Tried to anyway. But 4-H is very big at the county fair, and now they've introduced, the tractor pulls, and the demolition derby has become a tradition. Christmas celebrations. Some of the traditions are to put on St. Nicholas Day, December 5th, you put your shoes out. The French did that too. They put out carrots for Papa Noel as the French Santa, and his, he always is shown with a donkey, and his donkey's name is, it just left me, Guy, which means mistletoe, by the way. So that's his name. But we always put out our shoes and got candy and gum on the Feast of St. Nicholas. Down on the lower left is another really old tradition. It's called, and it's really not St. Genevieve, but I kind of claim the island in this. There's a legend, a story that they were in the old parish of Immaculate Conception. Back in the colonial days, they were having a thing for Mary, and they were having to have a procession, and this one Native American woman was too poor and couldn't bring anything for church. And on the way, it was in December, she found a white lily. So they still do the procession of the white lily, and they sing the song of Illa Noir, Doc Cabins, is usually in there, Brenda Bosler, several people, and it's only ladies, and they do a procession with the white and the link. One of my favorite things was St. Genevieve Church at Christmas time. It's a magical place. They've always decorated it very well. Our crutch scene goes back over 100 years. Even when we lived in Farmington, we'd come to St. Genevieve to see that at Christmas time. And when I was a kid, it was everybody went to midnight mass. We now do midnight mass at 10:30, but we still have it. And it was always, you had a flourish of trumpets at the beginning, which would wake you up seriously. And then they would sing a song called Billy May, Les Divines Enfants, in French, and we still do that. And traditionally with the French afterwards, they would have a dinner that was called a réveillon. And in Felix Valley still commemorates that event each year. And in the I'm trying to remember when we started that. 1984 we started the Christmas walk. It's been called different things over the time period, but that was really designed again to kind of increase tourism in the cold months. And it's become the parade's a big thing, and Netball's really done a good job of bringing music to town. This is not really, but this tradition of letters to Santa started in 1969 at the Fair Play. I started looking at letters to Santa, getting crazy stuff. What kind of toys did kids? What kind of toys did kids ask for? And I started looking every 10 years, but I started looking at some of these. And usually they say, I've been a very good boy or girl, and I'm going to leave stuff for you and Santa and everything. I like this one. It was a P.S. If you can, when you come to my play at church, and God, if you were there, I will wait 5 times. But I've been a good boy, but sometimes I haven't been listening very good. Is that okay to say? A lot of these are probably written by parents because they're kindergarten stuff, but this one was at bottom. It really goes on. He said, hi, I want a lot of things for Christmas. My sister doesn't deserve anything. She has been bad. I have been good. I deserve a lot. And he goes down at the end. He says, and I'm going to give you cookies and milk and hay for your
he's pulling up
eating everything, all stops. Any of you know Pat Huber? He graduated from Valley. He's a historian.
Yeah.
He's written 3 or 4 books. I found his first journal, or his first entry as a journalist. It was in one of these. He was 5 years old. He asked for a yellow hat and one for his little brother. Yeah. Some of them were kind of sad. I don't know if I had that one on there. There was one where this little boy or girl, I can't remember which, but she was always in trouble. But it was because her parents were building a house and they were arguing all the time. And she said, it's not my fault. So that tradition's been going on. So it's marvelous to see what these kids are asking for over time. Art's always been a tradition in St. Genevieve. It goes back to 1812 when John James Audubon was here as a business partner of Ferdinand Rozier. He didn't really paint anything here. We think he got some birds and to use for some of his art. He didn't really want to be in the mercantile business, so he went back to Henderson, Kentucky, where his wife was. Then the next thing, in the 1930s, we had the Summer School of Art. That was kind of a poor time, and artists couldn't go to Providence, Long Island, or Massachusetts to do the art schools there, so they opened one here in St. Genevieve. Jessie Beard Rickley, Bernard Peters, Amy Zweig, and her daughter Martille were great parts of that. They would bring in Thomas Hart Benton to teach, Joe Jones, Joseph Verst. I mean, very famous painters that painted in the tradition of called regionalism. And you can see this when you go down to, I think they're in the J.D. Valley House now, some of the kinds of painting that they did. That art colony went on from 1932 to 1941. And right at the end of that, there was a thing called the Treasury Program for new post offices. They were building a lot of post offices, and you had to submit ideas, and they chose, there were like 50 submittals, and people that were in the St. Genevieve Art Gallery either taught or students of it painted, I think, 20 of those. You can see one of them is in our round-the-clock art gallery in our post office, like E&A. There's one in Jackson, one in Fredericktown, a few others around southern Missouri, but they're also in South Dakota, Kansas, and Indiana. I put up there Vincent Dunker. He's a different kind of artist. He was a photographer, and he gave us a lot of people photos and places around town. Bill Nager's got a lot of his negatives. Whistlehorn is another guy. He was actually from Sparta, Illinois, but he loves St. Genevieve, and he actually has a book called the St. Genevieve's Sketch and Guidebook, and we have a couple of his originals and just love it. The Art Guild started up in 1983. They leased the museum building, the old museum building, in 2019 and had their grand opening in 2020. And we still have some really marvelous artists here. Allie Kavanaugh is known throughout the United States. She lives here in St. Genevieve. Going to kind of close up here. French nicknames is a tradition. One of the things that I found when I started researching in the colonial period, the French liked to give a different nickname for the last name. So you would have like Amélie Guire known as the Rose or the Rose. Chauvin was Joyeuse, which meant happy. La Bruyere, which is still a name we have around here, meant the thorn bush. I wonder if he was a little cranky or something. Dufour, Parfait Dufour, the baker. I like this one. La Source was kind of the go-to guy. So sometimes in documents you see their name as André de Guire, and sometimes you see their name as La Rose. And I always say they just did it to confuse historians and genealogists. But also, we still have de Guires and we still have La Roses. So sometimes the family would branch out and take part of the name and use it as their name. I always like the one at the bottom. Gilbert was La Fontaine, the fountain, and I don't know why he got that, but I suspect. And that kind of gets to the next slide, which is what that modern nicknames and German nicknames were completely different. They were the first name. How many of you have a nickname that you're willing to say?
I'm willing to say.
There's some good ones. In my mother's family, there were 5 girls: Bobby, Buddy, Deekley, Maida, and Coots. I had an Aunt Coots. I was 45 years old, and I found out her name was Magdalene. People would put their name on the mailbox, in the phone directory, on license plates. Izzy, Dizzy, Nuts, Nudie, Cat, and Goofy Gunzy. Sparrow, Taki, a few clothes, La Rose. He got that name because he was going to have a job on the boat. He had a little duffel bag with him, and the wind blew it off into the river. And they said, well, you must have had, didn't have any clothes there hardly. That's why he's that for the rest of his life. Then you had Pumpkin, Bigfoot, Littlefoot, Porky, and Schnee Blasler. You all know Schnee. He got the name Schnee from a neighbor kid because actually Schnee could write his name in the snow really good. And Schnee in German is snow. And that's how he got, I think that's probably how La Fontaine got his name.
Kiki,
Poochie, Piggy, Butts, Hammershare, Crabby Grass, Turkey Lurk, Nickel Splitter Nagger, and Fish Hook. Just wonderful descriptions. Sometimes when we moved back to Minnesota, I said, you might get a nickname. She said, what if I don't like it? I said, tough. So, and we have some many funny ones. We have some that you can't repeat.
Yeah.
Father stood up one day and said, Francis Bosler or somebody like that. I knew I was looking around like, who's Francis Bosler? Well, it was Bigfoot Bosler. And somebody asked Father at church, what happens when chicken something dies? What are you going to say there? So.
You don't have Eric Gap on there.
The other thing that sometimes we have traditions that they just become, you have family legends that are traditions, but we have some like St. Genevieve traditional dates, 1735, you see it on signs and everything. trying to figure out why it started 1735, because we see them from 1726 to 1762. And it wasn't until 1850 that a magazine in St. Louis said about 1735. Well, come 1885, they're going to have a centennial of moving from the old town to the new town. Well, Furman Rozier decides, I want to make some money, so he writes a book, and he says, it's the founding of St. David, it's the 150th celebration back to 1735, and my gosh, it's been 1735 ever since. And actually, the move from the old town to the new town didn't happen in 1785. It took 9 years. They didn't move the soldiers and the seat of government until 1793, and the church didn't move until 1794. So we kind of, sometimes we use these dates, you know, sometimes you like to be the first, the oldest, sometimes like that. They don't always work out. Names on houses or dates on houses are always interesting. You see a lot of stuff, and most of our stuff was built in 1784, the year before the flood, right after the flood. Well, we have tools now called dendrochronology, where we use tree rings that we can actually tell when the timbers are cut on a lot of our houses. I know my house, when I first bought it, had 1810 on it, and it's sure not an 1810 looking style of house. And I finally found a newspaper article where Mrs. Johnny had torn it down and built our house in 1873. Now, there are some beams in the basement that are new, so they reuse those. But it's really hard to date houses. We know when people buy lots, we don't know when they build houses. So we've had to change over time. But traditional dates are something we deal with all the time. And that's it. I probably took too long. So does anybody have a favorite tradition?
No, but I have an addition for you, and I can't believe you didn't bring this up. With deer clubs.
Oh, yes.
Several years ago, the Conservationist magazine had a big story about the history of deer clubs in Missouri. And I think the Weingarten Zell.
Zell Weingarten Deer Club was the first deer club in the
And
state.
it's the oldest continuous
deer club in the state.
Yeah. My great-grandfather, Benedict Huber, was a good shot. People would hire him to go out deer hunting. He lived in Zell.
Yeah.
It was probably before the deer club era.
But the deer club, I mean, every year that's such a big deal in the fall.
It's good to belong to one of those.
Well, then what about the squirrel suppers?
The what suppers?
Squirrel suppers.
Oh, yeah. Squirrels are a problem at St. Genevieve.
Oh.
Anybody that wants squirrels, I'll be glad to give them to you.
We need more squirrel suppers.
Yes, we do.
You could have threw apple butter in there too.
Yeah, I mean, people don't make that much anymore. When we lived in Farmington, my aunt, who was a Klein married to a Dagger, would always have out among the maple trees a big copper kettle with a big stirrer and make apple butter. One of the things we learned in Pennsylvania, because we lived very close to where the Amish were, apple butter on cottage cheese is wonderful. Try it sometime.
I love them both. I couldn't imagine.
But you used to do that. You
No.
put jelly right
Jelly, I mean, we would put jelly on it because you didn't like it. But
I had a friend who used to make bread, grape jelly, and cottage cheese.
so, does anybody know what Dumas is? How about Fazzetti? Which is a bigger Dumas, you don't just... No.
We made apple butter in our samples. In the big apple butter cooker, yeah.
Yeah. Those are kind of
The
neat
last
traditions.
one time we did it, my aunts were still alive, and boy, there was some serious fun happening there.
You know, we just don't grow apple. We were always famous for apples here, and cherry trees, and pear trees. There was a pear tree on Main Street that was 100 years old, by the chili shop.
We used to get apricots from the apricot tree there at your old house.
That was actually a peachicot tree. It was
It was the one thing in big ones.
That's why it was big.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's these kind of traditions are important. They keep us centered in our life. They make us feel good that we continue to do them. And I'd encourage you to keep family traditions, teach them to your children. I think it's important that they understand where we came from and why we do this and why it's important.
Another thing in the area was making sorghum molasses.
Right, yes.
Yeah, raising the
With
cane.
the mule that walked around.
Right, and press all the cane and go down the.
I mean, we have different food traditions in our family. My mom always made berry pies with custard in it.
Yeah.
And Jean makes a wonderful, wonderful strawberry rhubarb custard pie. Actually, there was I wish yesterday you missed a good traditions talk. Donna Harding gave a talk on the Mississippian culture and how it aligned with the Chickasaw culture. And she did a wonderful job. I mean, it could be here too. I mean, it really
Where did
is.
she do that at?
She had it at the art gallery.
Food kind of defines cultures and traditions, and I love looking at Andrew's number on TV because he gets into that kind of stuff.
Well, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for your input. And if you think of something after you get home, send me a message. Because I'd like to. I'm not done with traditions. We have a lot more, and we need to. Oh, I have one more slide. Okay. I guess you're going to probably talk about that too.
Oh, yeah.
There's more of these this week.
Yeah. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so we have, four more lectures coming up. Tomorrow, Tuesday, is Missouri Heritage with Skip Weiler. Tomorrow, Monday, Missouri Heritage with Skip Weiler. Tuesday, Veterans Stories with Ben Ebert and Philip Kwan. And Wednesday, Preserving Native American Traditions with the Chagody family. And then Thursday, Preserving Civil War History with Gary Shield. These all promise to be really interesting and informative. If you guys could make it, that'd be great. And we sure appreciate you coming, and we thank Bob so much. This was wonderful, absolutely wonderful.